Well, welcome to, and I want to greet you and thank you for watching another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show. I have such a great guest today. I'm very honored to have our sister city mayor, Mayor O'Reilly. Thank you so much for being a guest. And it's indeed always a pleasure to have him because besides the fact that we're both mayors, we're good friends. And so what we tried to do in the past when we've had this is just like you and I sitting in our living rooms talking. And so thank you so much, Mayor. And the residents of Dearborn are really blessed to have somebody like yourself. I always admire how your future thinking and how you brought the city of Dearborn in just a greater community than it was. And so having a neighbor and a mayor like yourself, it's just great to be working with you.
Well, and the feeling is mutual. I mean, I really think, you know, we have great cities and continuing to work together. I know we can continue to be places that people want to live, work, and recreate. And, you know, we can give them first-class service, which is, of course, our mutual ambition.
Right. And because the communities are so close, geographically, when we go to shop or churches or mosque or what have you, we're in each other's communities all the time. But you have a unique structure going up on Michigan Avenue as you kind of pass the Fairlane complex. What is that all about?
Well, yeah, the new train station is really exciting. We were able to get some ARA money. We've been planning to move the train station. It was, you know, the Henry Ford Museum, Greenville Village, is such a tourist attraction. And unfortunately, the train station behind our police station was a little far off the path for really utilization. And for many, many years, a lot of people don't know this, but the museum could actually have people board or deboard off of Amtrak on special occasions, or they do something special, but it really wasn't set up. There was a capacity. So we've been talking for some time about, wouldn't it be great if we had a train station that people could go right into Greenville Village Henry Ford Museum, just deboard, go right in, and so on. And so when there was competitive money out, we had a conceptual design, and as you remember, those were called shovel-ready.
Right.
Well, I think they took a loose term, but we had a pretty good developed idea. So we finished the idea and submitted it, and we were given the grant to build it. So this will be a unique train station because they'll be boarding. There'll be platforms on either side of the rail tracks, and there'll be you'll go up a raised group, go over the rail, and then come down, so that Greenville Village is going to be the entrance point, but you can also walk through there to get to the museum right from the train, and it'll be a shortcut. I mean, they're developing; they've already got it well developed, and then they're reorganizing stuff on their side, and actually it's going to be beautiful. They've had some water retention things there, but they were back of the house, so they weren't really landscaped. Now they're going to have a beautiful pond, and it's landscaped. It's going to be a really nice addition to you know, how people access, you know, our cities, and of course access this, you know, the biggest tourist attraction in Michigan. So.
But if I live in Dearborn or Dearborn Heights and I worked either in downtown Detroit or in Ann Arbor, I would be able to utilize this train for...
Yeah, that's what's really interesting. I mean, Amtrak will continue to operate the Amtrak services, so that's still going to be in place. But in addition to that, in 2015, we're going to launch a commuter rail system along that same rail line. And that would go from Ann Arbor. It would have a stop in Ypsilanti. It would have a stop for the airport. They're going to establish a shuttle-based stop for the airport. Then it would be Dearborn and then Detroit. Now, a couple of real interesting things about that is, by the time we do the transit for Detroit, right now the only Detroit station is up by the boulevard in Woodward. Okay. Well, they're doing that line, that surface rail line that's going to be going all the way from downtown Detroit, coming up Woodward. It ends there. So literally, when we get this in place, you'll be able to take the train, go down. You'll just transfer right there, but it'll be an easy transfer onto the existing. It'll be like the old trolleys in a way, and then you'll have 8 stops all the way down. So you'll have a couple stops in Midtown, and then the rest of the stops are in downtown. So basically, not a lot of stops. It'll be a pretty quick little trip. But the other major thing that changed actually after we began to even build get our station going, was that the federal government also gave the state of Michigan money to purchase the rail line from Norfolk Southern. And the reason that was done is that they want to go to high-speed rail between Detroit and Chicago. Well, that's the reality now. They're doing it, they're upgrading it. So that is really amazing, because I know I've taken the train to Chicago many times, people do, and it's nice if you have some leisure time. But it's generally 6 hours or more with the sidings. All of that will disappear. What's happening is the rail will be upgraded to 110 miles an hour, but more importantly, it's going to be separated from the freight, so that as you go through Indiana and you go into Chicago, there were two real bottlenecks that were causing trains to be held. Those are being changed. They have separate grades now, and when you come into Chicago, they've layered it so that one train goes over the other, so that actually we're talking about from Dearborn to Chicago about a 4-hour trip. And that's downtown, so it's point to point. And we, in 2015, are already planning to start marketing getaway trips to Dearborn. Hotels, restaurants, the Henry Ford Greenfield Village, all that kind of thing. We see a market only because of the price points. I mean, we can undercut downtown Chicago by a good margin, and we can shuttle them down to casinos and sporting events and other venues. So we really see ourselves being able to use that high-speed rail as a marketing tool, because right now most of the people go from Michigan over to Chicago, but not many people from Chicago are coming to Michigan. And we hope we can turn that around.
And your foresight, but it's extremely important for the region, because this rail can generate more, as you indicated, traffic, which is going to generate more jobs. Right. And also because for a long time this area was able to generate a lot of traffic, mini conventions and stuff, and we need to go back and get that traffic, because it really has a big impact on the Dearborn Heights area. So what your foresight in having this come, it's really an exciting thing that I'm glad we're able to talk about it today, because I think the residents of Dearborn Heights are going to benefit greatly from this one example here.
Oh yeah, there's no question, because there's also transit-oriented development. Now, in the first rollout, right now they're projecting 4 round trips in addition to Amtrak. And then, of course, if that works out, they'll go to more intensity. But it's just what you said. When that starts to happen, then other investments come up around it. Transit-oriented development is the formal term for it, but it's the concept that now I want to live close to that, because now I don't have to have a car. I'll get on the train if I work downtown. I mean, this is literally going to be reality. You get on the train in West Dearborn and you go right downtown to your job and come back on that same train. And the number of stops would be the 8 stops on the surface rail and 1 more. I mean, so it's not like you're waiting. It's not like this, you're stopping, starting. It's really going to be quite effective. So that's going to be great. But also for people who just want to go down for leisure. They want to go downtown or midtown and go to events or go to restaurants, whatever. It's going to be an easy thing. And the parking issue, you're paying $15, $20 to park at a lot down there, and then you have to get in early and get out when you can get out. Here you'd have an alternative way. So that's going to really enhance the attractiveness of our area, the hotels in our area, everything. And so I think we're looking for that kind of thing. We had Michigan State University did a process where they did a sort of visioning on what might happen with transit-oriented development around the station, within radius of the station. And we got a lot of community input. People participated in it, and we saw a lot of great opportunities, great things that we think can come from it.
Another area that I see going in the future, and I want to congratulate you on. I think you reached an agreement with the city of Melvindale on fire services, and we're in discussion with our neighbor Garden City. And when you look back, and we've done things together, I'm utilizing your IT department, and that's going very well. We brought library services, and you and I have both talked about that. Rather than be duplicating, it only makes good sense to utilize jointly in whatever way we can for the betterment of both of our residents. And when I've looked back and being on the campaign stump, if you will, and people will say, well, more efficiency, and we've reached an efficiency in a lot of our departments that there's only like 2 or 3 people in them, that I always see, and I think you would agree, that the future is by having the communities work together in joint way, and that's really where the savings are. They're not so much internally within departments, because those savings have already been obtained to a large degree. But I wanted to congratulate you, and the Melvindale is going real well.
Oh, it's going very well. But and you hit really the key theme here, is that you know, the federal government shut down. Admittedly, there are people impacted, but for the most part, for everybody I'm talking to, they're going through day-to-day lives. It's not a huge impact. The state shuts down. Okay, you'll feel a little bit here and there. Still not the same thing. If your city shuts down, I don't care where you are, your city shuts down. First day, you're going to notice it. A couple days later, you're going to go, wow. I mean, it's the city services that are the day-to-day quality of life. And that's my point, is I'm not diminishing the value of state services. I'm not diminishing the value of federal services. But the truth is, for the average person, the quality of life on a day-to-day basis, on my ability to get things done, to be secure, all those things, are totally tied to the local. And so what we have to do is get people to not think about how to look at it parochially, like, well, we're us and they're them, but look at it as what's the quality of service, and that's the issue. And in Melvindale, it's a win-win. I mean, there's no question. We did the analysis. We actually, by adding their station to our service mix, we actually have better response time to certain parts of Dearborn that we didn't have. And they have better response time to some of theirs. And that's what people have to understand, because these are emotional issues. And the big challenge, you know, we aren't going to have the money we had to operate. I mean, that's a reality. So, and I'm not, you know, saying I'd like that, but I'm not worried about it. But we have to then accept that we have to adapt how we deliver service, not the quality of service, just how we deliver service, to make it more reasonable. And the biggest thing is get rid of the overhead. Cut the overhead so you're getting down to the real service strategy. And that's going to be done collectively. And with Melvindale, it really did work out well. As we looked at it, they were at a point, they had a number of retirees, and they were holding the thing. And we had a few vacancies to fill, and we kind of held the line while we tried to work out, you know, you turn, I'm an attorney, you turn it over to the attorneys to solve, you know, they're billing by the hour. But basically, we got all the details worked out, and it's really a great plan. And everybody's getting along great. I mean, oh my God, both unions supported it, because this had to be done. This wasn't imposed on anybody. The unions were full partners. They agreed, worked through it, and you know, both councils. So this was something where we sat down, did the analysis, and said, this is good for both of us. And I think if we talk about, because this is one of the things that your viewers need to think about, as you talk about fire services, here's the thing that's important for people to remember. The fire suppression, fires, of course, have gone way down because of smoke detectors and because of things like sprinkler systems that we've imposed on people. The number of runs we're doing for actual firefighting is way down. But correspondingly, ambulance runs have gone up, you know, so that one reversed the other. We were at, it's sort of 80-20. We were at 80% fire runs about 25 years ago. Now we're at 80% ambulance. But the key is the response time. The two most important things when you call an ambulance is response time, and then the quality of service provided at the curbside. And you know, we're on both on ALS, which is the highest level. We're able to treat people. If when our people arrive at the curb, they are in contact with the emergency room physician. They describe the symptoms. They're well trained. The physician can tell them, start administering this or start administering that. We can mitigate strokes and heart attacks. We can decrease the time for recovery by that action, what we do then. And so time is the issue. Now, here's the problem. It isn't distributed. We can have all the fire stations you want, but at the end of the day, you could have 3 calls within 4 blocks of each other, and you know, there's nothing you can do. I mean, you've got to have that coverage. And so the more participating fire stations, fully staffed and so on, fire stations that are part of a region that more likely you can really be responsive because you can't control where things are going to happen.
Right.
What part of this city is going to have the calls? Where are the calls going to come from this day, and then next day they'll come from the other side or whatever. So that's the thing people have to understand. In fire and ambulance service, the calls are random. They come from wherever, and you respond from your fixed sites. So the more fixed sites that are aligned and evenly distributed, the better the quality of service. So what I'm saying is we have to look at it in that context of say it's not our border, the line that separates us, but what's the best service model? And that's what you're talking about. That's what we're talking about. We know our friends, you know, in a little further west of us, you know, Wayne and you know,
In Westland,
yeah, the West. They're all looking at the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the right thing to do. And I know a lot of people get nervous because they think, oh, but it's not the way we did it. But we already know the data. We've seen it. We've looked at others. This is the way to go because you're cutting your overhead and therefore you're not cutting service. Which is, I mean, for our people out there, you and I both understand it. If we can keep the service and cut the overhead, that's the best thing.
And the other thing, like you indicated, because we've had both, excuse me, the Garden City and the Dearborn Heights Firefighter Union participating, and we've gone through. And the other thing that your community, and we've done in Dearborn Heights, is this proactive, where we've had the firemen, the marshals go out, work with the business community. So when there is a suppression fire, it's going to give us more resources, but like as you've indicated, they've really gone down because of the proactive. And now when you spread the, instead of servicing, in my case, 23,000 homes and 1,500 businesses, I now can distribute that resource to another 10,000 residency and 2,000. I can handle that. The cost per resident is lower. You're getting it ensures this continued great service. Mm-hmm. And then when you do need more units, they're at the disposal. Mm-hmm. So everybody, it's going to cost less. We're keeping the fine standard that both communities have had traditionally, and there's more people to help us when we need it.
Then that's the idea. And you're using your equipment cost effectively. You know, equipment that sits all day in the station is on the ready, but it's not producing value.
Right.
And so the more that equipment goes out and is producing value, the better. And so that's why you want to have that, you really want to have that balance. And that, as you described, that's why you save money, because now that equipment is being used. You're paying for it whether it's sit in or not. I mean, and you're paying the staffing, whether it's in the station or it's out in the field doing work. So the whole key is to use that well so that you have the coverage to meet every emergency and have short times, and we both do well on response times, but you're also not having a lot of wasted assets or assets that are costs that are not producing value on a larger basis. And there's things that we've started talking about in other ways. I mean, for example, here's a good example. I don't want to throw you off and have you get in trouble. It's an election year, and they're going, oh, this is the first time we're talking about this. But if you look at Dearborn Heights, okay, I mean, we overlap in ways where you have, you know, a small band that connects the north and the south, and we have kind of the broader. We go south this way, and then we come around this way, and so one of the questions becomes on things like plowing streets and so on. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I could see a way where we could coordinate where our truck stops, you know, whatever, and then turns around and going, but it's easier to keep going straight and come down.
Exactly.
I mean, and so those are the kind of conversations, and I hope that people are listening going, well, that's not what we're going to do. It's the kind of conversation we have to have.
Yes.
Because it would make more sense. If we're getting more roads plowed in the same time frame, we're getting greater productivity, and it isn't increasing our cost. So what difference does it make if the truck has one name on it or the other, if the service is getting provided and everybody's just paying their fair share, you know, but it's getting it done. And it's just an illustration of the way we have to think. We can't go back to the way things were because the revenue stream is proved not dependable for that. And the state and federal government aren't in any position to help. I mean, my expectation, I really believe, we have to realistically, it's not just what's going on now, but just because we can't keep rolling up the debt, the federal government is going to have to start cutting back on a lot of the money they invest. I was surprised that I didn't realize that 40% of the state budget came directly from the federal government. I knew it was large, but that seemed really substantial to me. So I think we look at government service, and I had this conversation even with the current lieutenant governor. I think we really need to start talking about who does what, what's the best scale, and not worry about lines, but say what roles are best suited to the state and what do they fulfill, what are perhaps county roles, and then what are the local government roles, and then once we've decided where everything is best delivered for the most cost efficiency, and then talk about, well, then what are the models that will best fund that? Because that's really what we need to be, not trying to make the things of the past work in the future, but trying to create a new model for the future that's going to be effective and let us be sustainable, 25, 30 years going forward. We can see the path we're on, and we know that we're going to be secure because we've come up with a good way to address the combination of services versus cost.
And kind of following up on that, and I'll use an example, some geographical distance away from us, so we're not using communities right connected to us.
Good idea.
But you look at a community like Ecorse, which I don't think either one of us touch, but maybe I'm mistaken.
No.
But you had steel industry who supported, so you had a Trenton and Ecorse. I'm convinced that you need a certain degree of geographical area and a certain population, and you can remain viable. I don't think a community, let's say with 5,000 or 7,000 people in this urban area, I can't see how you can become and maintain a viable city, offer a fire department, a police department, DPW, and all the services that garbage pickup and everything people expect. So I agree with you. I think we need to look at some of those geographical boundaries and say, in the same way that in this particular city, I've had to deal with 7 different school districts. And it's like a person calls and they go, what school district am I in? And in some cases, I have to ask them if they're on the north or south side of the streets or east and west, because that's where the boundary is. And there's so much redundancy and the resistance. Everybody has a certain amount of emotional appeal for their particular high school. They might have graduated. In my case, it's 2 generations at Crestwood, so there's a certain degree. But at the same time, how many high schools? How many schools do you need? And what is the viable number? Because at the bottom end, at the end of the day, you want your kid to have a good quality education that if they decide to go vocational, they're ready. If they decide to go on for additional college, that they're ready and can compete. And those are issues that fundamentally we need to talk about as a state, as a community, and do it in a rational, logical pattern.
Well, I'll give you an example, which is interesting. About, I think it was 6 years ago, there was a group of people who were assembled from China, who were sent over here for 9 months, and they were staying in Dearborn and working with University of Michigan Dearborn. And what they were trying to be is exposed to as much of how government operations and things worked here. But they had been selected from different parts of China, and there were about 28 of them, if I remember. But what they were here to do is learn everything they can, and to begin to focus how to work together. They all had identified positions, but they were going to go back and be responsible for running a city that was being built, okay? Not a city that existed already. The city they were going to, when they left to come here, there was nobody in it. I mean, they were still working on developing it, but they were coming together as a team to run the city. And I probably learned more from them than they learned from me. I wish I could be the opposite, but it was just interesting to see, because now, and this is the thing, we have to start thinking like this, even though we have to live with what's here. They're looking at a white paper design and saying, if we can build a city, what makes sense? So they're thinking about all those things like, how do we get people to and from work? How does the housing make the most efficient use in compared to where the jobs are? So they're strategically laying out cities on the basis of what really is the best for everyone to get where they are, to diminish wasted resources, you know, to make the most of assets. And I thought, wow, that's so novel. And here's the crazy thing. They were building a city of about, I think it was 5 to 6 million people. Okay.
Wow.
So that's considered a modest-sized city in China, which is another frightening thing. But it made me think. And so I started thinking about our area. I said, well, if you were going to redesign our area, let's say, you know, we didn't have the boundaries and we were going to take and redesign it, you know, would you have it look like it does today? I don't think anyone would. If they seriously analyzed and said, would the, like you said, a city of under 10,000 people or whatever, is that the way you'd set up a system? Because I give you an example with us in Melvindale, they had 17 officers, but they had a chief and deputy chief and so on. Well, so the administrative, and they needed it to function, but the problem is the administrators versus the actual persons on the front line was top heavy because you have no choice in that model.
Right.
And so, you know, it's just one illustration, but the key here is, how would we do it? And I'm just going to tell you, I started looking, I said, you know, to make it make sense for us, I would say you'd look at creating service delivery areas. And I would not even bother with changing city lines and city names. That to me just becomes more of a burden, and it creates a lot of emotional backlash, and it's not necessary. What you do is create delivery areas of 250 to 300,000 people, because that's small enough to still have good accountability, but it's large enough to get the cost down, get the economies of scale, right? So you start assembling those, and those become authorities or whatever, and then it can work. And you know, I mean, you could go with a larger platform, but we've seen with some of the, you know, large counties and stuff, if they were managing all the local services, it wouldn't be as effective. You gotta figure out where that right point is. And this is just off my analysis.
I agree. I felt for a long time that one of the biggest difficulties the city of Detroit had, it's almost too big.
It's mass.
And you have, how many times, even family members who grew up on the east side, and they said, well, we don't go on the other side of Woodward. And it was like, it's almost like the city of Detroit there's an east side and a west side, and except for funerals and weddings, the two sides don't meet. But I always thought that was so interesting. We all go to Tiger games and Red Wing games and things of that sort, but they stayed on the east side and we stayed on the west side.
Yeah, actually, and more characteristically, which is really true, the migration out of the city followed those patterns.
Yes.
People went west and north, or they went east and north.
Yes.
And so not only was that separation of the city of Detroit, it turned into the separation from, you know, Macomb County to Oakland County to Wayne County. I mean, because people followed what they knew. They stayed with the familiar. And so that's part of that concept. And then why don't we start talking about how to create service delivery models? And it wouldn't be necessarily the same for every service, but that are going to be cost effective. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, we've got to have adequate police and fire. Absolutely. That's an essential, that's our basic, that's what we have to provide, and you have to have the roads to go on. And then you start looking at all the other amenities, and you say, okay, let's do that. But if we can get that cost down, maybe each community continues to have their local amenities, but you deal with that cost structure. Now, I know, you know, this is scary stuff to people because it's not what they know, but things aren't going to what we know anyway. I mean, the truth is, if anybody's paying attention, you and I have enough years behind us to know no matter what we thought might happen, one thing for sure is what used to be isn't anymore, and we've moved into something new. So the way to do it effectively is to have a vision for how would you do this, and really that's the conversation, because it really does make sense. Even if we didn't have the financial issues we have, it would still make more sense because you're taking money to do things, and if you can do them cheaper, then you don't have to take as much money. You know, and I'm not promising that taxes would necessarily be immediately cut, but the growth of taxes could certainly be restrained, which is one other element.
And the other thing is as one of these service delivery centers gets an expertise, that can then be duplicated, and that expertise, maybe you become the expertise in DPW, and I'm the expertise in another area, and then we draw on each other. Mayor, we could talk on and on, but the key, I think, for the viewers out there is we really are always trying to think of the future and where we're headed. And we realize that the model that was used even 5 years ago could not be used successfully now. And so we're constantly having to update. But we are very, as I said in the opening of the show, we're very blessed to have you as our neighbor and a mayor that's so visionary. And it's always a pleasure to work with you. And I'm so fortunate to have had you as a guest today. And so thank you, my friend, and continued success as a neighbor.
And you too. I mean, like I said, I have a great affinity for Dearborn Heights for a lot of reasons, but mostly because my wife was born and raised here and spent her whole, until I married her and took her to Dearborn. She'd always lived in Dearborn Heights. So, so she's the best thing that ever happened to me. So I give your town credit for that. So,
okay, we'll take it.
So that makes me very fond of Dearborn Heights.
Okay, and with that, I want to thank all the viewers for watching another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show. Thank you. I think it went well.